Greetings, darklings from across the interweb. It is once again I, the Duchess Precious Ken, and I am back for the Sounds and Shadows podcast. It's been a minute. We took a little hiatus there, but we are back now. I have a really exciting one for today. This is going to be super cool. Before we get to that, though, as I always say, if you send me something in the mail, I will wear it or show it or talk about it on the show. So I'm going to start doing that. I have this very cool, lovely t-shirt of the Anton Poncelet band, which is on the East Coast. And they do this really cool, I don't know, velvet underground meets dark wave vibe. That it's very organic. And I love the vocals and love the way that he sings. So very cool. Check that out. They were on the Sounds and Shadows Dark Scene single chart for last month. And the other thing that I got is my dear friend Bruce Nullify of Orcus Nullify sent over his brand new CD here, Creatures of the Wheel. And it has a cool cover art with a Heronius but kind of look to it of what is it? Kronos eating his children there, the Roman or Greek mythology. So that's another thing to check out. Now, man, we've had a lot of great ones lately. And this one is really exciting because it's not another band, which we love to do and promote only, but I love having other aspects of the industry to talk about, give our listeners a chance to learn something new. And today with me, it is my pleasure to introduce Christian of COP International, the record label with a lot of our big favorites, as well as having his own band, Deathline International. Welcome to the show, Christian.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that.
Now, we got introduced on the group, I think at first through Stephen Archer, I think, which was a sign that you guys did a little while ago, our dear friend Stephen with his Stoneburner project. But also, you reached out to me and you put out some compilations that you were looking for a name for, and I got the honor of getting to name the compilation for you, which was really exciting. And I thought a great comp that both highlighted bands on your label, but also you kind of lifted all ships and were giving a shout out to other things that weren't on your label that you were listening to and giving some ears to that by sharing them with some of your bands. What was kind of the idea or impetus behind doing that?
I've been doing compilations pretty much from day one on the label. Mm-hmm. And when we restarted the label, I was like, okay, there's a really happening scene out there. And I really love that. I love to see that energy. And I mean, I wish I could sign 3 times as many bands as I'm currently signing, but I can't. So people send me stuff and it gets into I really dig this box, but I cannot work with them at this point, or for whatever reason, it's just not a good fit or whatever, but I like it. And so these compilations were a little bit of an outlet where I was like, I really appreciate A, that you reached out. B, I really appreciate your music, and hopefully I can give you a little bit more of a platform to show off your goods. Yeah. And the other thing is, I mean, this is a while back, and you might have noticed that we haven't done those in a while. I had a bit more time because as we're adding more bands, my workload is becoming bigger and bigger. And so I love fun projects, things that come out of left field, things that come at me. Sometimes it's late at night and I have this genius idea and I'm like, oh man, why did I do this to myself? But no, what I'm trying to say is, I realized that over the decades we have created a platform, and that has a little bit of visibility, so we might as well use that. And so giving people an opportunity to be seen and heard, I think, is one of the coolest things we can do as a label. And I also wanted to send a message, which is, well, this is not a closed environment. where you're on the label, you're not on the label. And if you're not on the label, I don't give a fuck about you because I'm busy with whoever is on the label. And I can swear here, right?
Yeah, you.
I will. I'm just saying.
We don't even try and monetize.
Good. And I wanted to communicate in a way that, look, I'm very open. I know there's some really cool stuff out there. And I love working with a broader range of people because I think it all comes back, it goes full circle. And some bands that I worked with in the past, things happened down the line that were great. And so, it's just a fun thing to do. And the right thing to do, so to speak.
Yeah. You and your glorious chaos, Christian, I was going to ask about this very thing a little bit later, but because you've segued it so nicely, I will jump into it. I think another part of that is labels have changed. In 2023, it's a lot different thing than maybe when you started COP in 91. Those are two very different animals, even for a boutique type label of industrial or a genre that isn't as mainstream. And especially now, a label isn't necessarily the answer for every band because a lot of people can self-release, and to be able to help them get to that next level, they need to get to a certain point themselves before really you can help each other, where you can use your contacts and people in the industry and to give them that next step. It really isn't for everyone. So getting a chance to kind of reach out to things that you just enjoy the sound of and and establish that relationship, but maybe when you could help them more down the line and be more good for them, you've established that now. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you couldn't use them on the label later. You have to be sensible and communicate with a label and say, okay, here's what I as a band am looking for. And you as a label saying, here's what I could do for you right now, and make sure that those two things match. How much does kind of that go on in that communication and mindset when you're trying to decide who is it that would be the right fit for us?
So, okay, there's a lot to unpack here.
There is. Yeah, sorry.
Let's start. So the one thing that, like I told you previous, is that I took a hiatus, so to speak, where the label was really working on the most basic level, and I figured, okay, for the most part, it has run its course. And then I met John Fryer, and then everything changed. And then I spent 6 months, I call it digging foundations, because when you see a beautiful house, you don't see the foundations, but they take a long time. And so what I did is I was just literally sitting here, and my head there was this constant conversation, and it was basically a little bit like this: exactly what is it that a label can do for a band in the 21st century? And I think it really depends on personality. And it really depends on, like you said, are things matching? So I'm just going to try to work through this. Yeah. Beautiful concept, empathy test. They just toured the US. Yeah. I talked to them probably 2 years ago because I thought
Isaac is amazing. Great band, love the sound. Yeah,
exactly. So I talked to them about 2 years ago. They were like, "Yeah, no, we're good." And I was like, "Oh God," because I really love them. But I get it. Isaac can and wants to do everything himself. He's proud of it, and he's very capable. Yeah. And I think if you are in a band and you're lucky enough to have a person that is a marketer, that understands branding, wants to do social media, the outreach, basically control every aspect of your career, wonderful. Yeah. You can really do things to a certain level. I think at some point there is a natural stopping point when the workload becomes too much. And so there are certain levels of where a team of people can help. And the way I look at it is very simple. Rexha Khanna was nice enough. He did this, and it really kind of blew my mind because I never thought about this. He was like, "Yeah, you dedicated your life to this music and the scene." Mm-hmm. And I'm a little bit of a lone wolf, so I was like, "Wait, what?" And then I was thinking, like, "Shit, yeah, that's exactly what I did." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." I'm not joking. It was really like this realization. But in the end, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help people. And like you said, it has to be a good match. Expectations have to match. I feel sometimes musicians have a certain level of impatience because maybe they're a little younger or they want things to happen now, and certain things like campaigns that I do for bands right now at a minimum are a year. I'm working with a really awesome booking agent in Germany, and we're talking about 2025 because 2024 is basically booked. All the major festivals are booked, and so just these are some serious stretches of time. So I think that like I said, I really had to redefine what I do, and basically I changed a couple of things. One is I completely overhauled my contract. This is a partnership, and it's a real partnership with the emphasis on the artist actually being in charge of his art. Because this is a griping point of a lot of artists, like, oh, the label is telling us to do this or that, and we hate it. Now, I have a bit more of a differentiated point there, because the reality is also part of my gig is to understand what's happening out there and to make suggestions accordingly. And I always tell my bands, please take it seriously. I usually don't speak up until I have a really good reason, because usually I just let them do that. But then again, a lot of bands are, well, I'm a musician. That's what I want to do. I don't want to spend all that time on social media. I have no clue how to do art, so can you help me with that? Social media is a little dicey because I think in the end you really need to have your own profile.
It has to be your voice if you want to connect with people. People won't buy into it unless it's genuine from the artist.
Correct. So this added a part of a workload that didn't exist before in the 90s. In the 90s, your job was to tour and to be available to the fans after the show.
Sure.
And that was your social connection, right? Today, you can you have to definitely do a bit more. However, I do at times feel that social media is a bit overrated. Sure. I feel that the connections that you make with people when you meet them, even if you do Zooms, I think this is still a different thing. I make a real point, even if I couldn't see my bands, to Zoom a lot to establish a personal relationship. And I think that really matters. But in the end, you have to have music that connects with people, and then ultimately I can help. And I can help to a certain degree. I mean, I think I know that we as a label doing the best job that we've ever done. And this is constantly improving because I'm not happy with the status quo. I always have a list of things where I feel like, shit, I need to do better. I can do more. But again, we have limitations, but all things considered, I'm super excited to work on a level that I was not capable of working before. And John Fryer was a big deal of that, because on one hand, he helped me with production, and he gave us a sound that was just absolutely amazing. And B, at the beginning, for the first couple of years, John and we would talk every day for at least an hour. And it was not necessarily just business, for the most part, it was just like shooting the shit, telling stories. And, oh yeah, I have to deal with that. Oh yeah, there was this, and just getting that wealth of information, that experience was really, really amazing to me.
So I think that's part of it is you mentioned a couple times, and everybody should, but maybe if they don't watching this, who you're talking about is, you connected with John Fryer, which that is a literal legend in the production of electronic music, whether you're talking 4AD, or whether you're talking about producing on Pretty Hate Machine. Okay. I mean, you really, can't get, a bigger wealth of understanding or knowledge when it comes to how to make things sound right or sound interesting. And so, yeah, that's something that when you talk about what can a label offer to an artist, part of it is your connections like that to say, I can not just give you my feedback of maybe what could be done here or the possibility, but have someone like John Fryer, who even the biggest ego in the room has to stop for a minute and say, and I can say this definitively because I've had this discussion with Stephen Archer, who definitely can be one of the biggest egos in the room. where he would say, okay, when John Fryer says it, I stop for a minute and go, okay, I need to listen to this right now because it's John Fryer.
Right.
So that's part of it. But the other aspect is something we kind of talked about before we started, rolling on the interview, is artists aren't always known, especially when you're younger. I know I wasn't, for being the most organized, planning their lives 2 years in advance, and we're at a world now where, because of the pandemic and the backlog and touring and international touring and understanding laws going country to country and moving gear and logistics, a lot of artists don't really have the connections and know-how to put that together themselves. And that's where a label like you comes along and says, let me give you the benefit of both our expertise and the people we know in various countries, cities, so on and so forth, to help you make this happen. So when you put on a great show, I have eyes that are potential new fans seeing it from you, and then they want to buy your album.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is also, that was one of the most beautiful things. I got a lot of help. I mean, obviously John is invaluable, and obviously John was the only one that could drag me out of retirement. Greg Rolfs, who does a lot of our art, is really invaluable, because it's basically the way I work is I delegate, and then I don't want to think about it anymore. It's like, look, you need to do this. Can you handle it? Yes, wonderful. Off my to-do list.
Sure.
And he's been incredibly good with that. My friend Stephen Lamb, who's a bandmate from Deathline, he's helping me with a lot of the mastering gigs. Sabine Walz from IMD Booking has become an incredible ally. We've been working really, really closely together. We have a lot of things going on in 2024. My friend Eric Burton, he works for Schubert Music, but he also runs the DAC. We started business, and then he came and visited a couple of times, and now I just spent a full day with him in LA, and it was just awesome, because we went to a record store together, of all places, of course. But we also he's an incredibly creative mind. He has all these ideas, and so he's always pushing the envelope, and I absolutely love that, because I think it's also part of my job is to not be comfortable, because that's where growth happens, when you feel like, shit, can I handle this? And yeah, well, usually it works out in a good way, or at least you learn something really valuable. So I really have to say, Selena Fergassi was working for us on a retainer for a while, and for like about 2 years. And it was not just that she's working things for us, and now we work with her with individual topics, but I'm observing her. I'm learning from her. I see how she crafts certain things, how she approaches things. That's another thing. I positively love to be surrounded by smart people, because I'm like a sponge, I want that. And I think one of the things that I feel pretty good about myself is I'm very happy to let go of responsibilities. Yeah. There's always, I always have the next crazy idea, or the next project. And my motivation is excitement, and being able to attract and motivate people of that caliber has been incredibly awesome. Feels great, dude.
No, I mean, that is everything. And I think that's a very underrated skill set that to me, I do a lot of, and that's important too, is I don't have to be the best at, or the smartest person, or even the best singer or producer or anything like that. Because a lot of times those people, the truly brilliant ones that kind of shimmer through our lives like shooting stars, they aren't always the best communicators or easiest and especially with each other, and being the type of person that can help two brilliant people come together and communicate, say like Greg, on hearing music and turning that into a visual experience that's correct and projects the right emotion in an album cover, having that come together, and like you said, trusting that you've put the two right people in the room, is an important skill in and of itself,
Absolutely. I mean, Walter from Stabbing he said something that was a really nice compliment. He said, that when we did the whole production thing, and he was like, well, you were the conductor.
Yes,
you made sure that everything kind of in the end connected and worked, but you gave us plenty of space, which was, I think, is really the key. Catalyst is another thing that comes to mind, when sometimes I have an idea. I'm working on a project right now, and I basically I declared someone an ambassador, and he's doing a fantastic job. And I'm like, look, man, I have the idea. I'm going to have the platform, and I'm going to help you. But in the end, you're going to need to do a lot of the heavy lifting because I can't. So also understanding your own limitations. I know what I can do. I know what I'm good at, and I really know what I'm not so good at. So if I find somebody who's like, I'm like, yes, please.
know yourself. I mean, that is the key to a lot of things. So I want to change gears a little bit here. And like I said, this is going to kind of shoot off of that question, but you've been doing this since 91. I've worked with a lot of big bands. You mentioned a minute ago, Walter. I mean, stabbing westward to 16-year-old Ken in his bedroom because some girl done him wrong, like crying away. I mean, that was it for me. That was a very big deal, and getting to see them at Cold Waves a few years back. And I was right back in that bedroom in that moment, just one of those transformative bands. And then here doing things in 2023, 2024, being a label is a different experience. What do you think are some of the biggest changes towards how you get music to people in 2023 versus when you started out in, getting bands out in the same way in 1991 from a technology and, like you said, social media, all those things standpoint? What are the biggest both challenges and things maybe you think are easier today?
Well, I can do what I do in a day that my crew of 5 that we had back in 1991 couldn't do in a week.
Wow.
I was the first one in the US, and might be even in Europe, that started sending out demos via MP3. Oh boy, did people go nuts. Like, this is horrible. Why would you do this? This is total bullshit. Within 2 years, every other label copied that. Because you can innovate, but you can never, maintain the lead. And why was that? Because I used to fucking ship 300 CDs in the US alone, and then in Europe we did the same thing, to DJs. So that means the office is closed for a day or two, and you just pack. And then you go to the post office. And I mean, there's all, and now okay, here's my playlist, here's my pictures, here's my MailChimp, click, buy. You want it? Oh, you didn't open your fucking thing. I can see it's data driven. I think it's important to not get sucked completely into this hole. Some people might argue with me over that, but at least for me personally, that doesn't work. But I have the capability to see. Back in the day, okay, so let me go back, because I think this is really important, and I want to use this opportunity to also project a message, because we basically have a no demo policy at the label at this point. And of course, back in the day, like I said before, somebody would send me a tape, we would check it out, we would say, you know what, we love the music, maybe we can work something, and then you can build it up from the ground. And today, this is one of the major changes. That was a very passive, very reactive way of dealing with music or signing bands, because the only bands that I could get are the bands that actually wanted to come to the label. Sure. And nowadays, I work completely different. I still have, I have industry contacts, people that will go like, hey, you need to check these guys out, or, that kind of stuff. And I find, so Mark has been really, really helpful. Greg, actually, I get messages, and that makes total sense. Keep an eye on these people. But what I do also is I look at bands, and I look for 2 things. A, do I like the music, which is still super important, because if I don't like the music, I cannot really sell it. But B, are these guys working their ass off? And I think a lot of times musicians forget about that. So if somebody comes to me with 50 monthly listeners on Spotify, I do make exceptions. I literally just going to announce a band that is still at the beginning, but I feel there's so much potential, and there's a whole story behind that. But the reality is like, look, mate, you want to be on a label, but you never played a show. That would be equivalent 1991. You got to keep kind of, I mean, what do you need the label for, and what does the label gets out of you? Because this is a two-way street, you know. Sure. So these days I'm much more active, meaning I have a vision. So sorry, there's a lot again. There's a lot. When I met John and we talked about the label, the first thing that we talked about is like, okay, we're going to open the format, because John was not just electro-industrial. John was like, I mean, he wrote fucking all the 4AD, or not wrote, but, you know, produced 4AD. That's post-punk. You know, that's, and so many people, I love that. I love to see the kids, the 20-year-olds, oh, post-punk, coolest thing ever. When I was 20, post-punk was the coolest thing ever because it was literally a circle, right? Exactly. And I'm literally talking to a band right now that has me super excited, because my 20-year-old would really like go squeal, because they were one of the bands that kind of invented this whole genre. And so anyway, so John and I sat down and said, okay, we need two things. We need star power, because I cannot just sign a bunch of small bands. We need to go in with a bang. That's where Stubbing Westward was basically approached, because I was like, you know, I was going through his catalog. I love Stubbing Westward. I saw that we self-released some stuff. I'm like, maybe we can help. So that worked out beautifully. And then the other thing is that we said, okay, we want to make this label more open. And so currently what's going to happen is we're going to have 3 divisions, basically. I've been wrestling a lot. Should I split it? Should I not split it? And I was like, no, it's going to be one fucking label. We're an independent label. So we're going to have one part industrial metal, rock, metal section. Very, you know, because that's stuff that I personally like. You know, so I understand it. At least I think that. And there's a lot of action there, and it's fun. Then we're going to have a post-punk division, Cassandra Complex. And I mean, it's what's also really nice is I can talk to younger bands, and I can talk to older bands as well. So I want to have, I don't want us to be a pure legacy label, but I do want us to be connected to our roots. And what better opportunity than, you know, being able to work with some of my idols from back in the day, you know, and see what they have to offer. And then obviously we're going to do the industrial electronic stuff, because it's the same thing. We have some fantastic bands working on that. So, but that's going to be kind of the situation. And to make that a reality, because these things become self-reinforcing silos, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, we signed Visto Blanco, and I was this thing, oh my God, Visto Blanco, Stabbing Westward, full European tour, and I was like, that would be so fucking cool. So in my head, I'm trying to build these packages, because that's another thing. Being on the road is not an easy gig. When you're a small band, getting on the road with a bigger band is very hard or costs you a lot of money. Sure. And so I'm trying to create these situations like, Cassandra Complex is literally doing a world tour. I'm so stoked for them. And we have just announced the first leg, but there will be much more than that. And Vaseline is going with them in Europe in selected dates. They're going to play 6-7 shows with them. And I'm so excited. And Rodney was awesome. He was so cool. He's like, yeah, dude, I'm on the label. I want to support the label. And of course, I want to support the bands on the label. I'm like, Rodney, I love you.
Because that was a dear friend, and definitely is one of those that really cares about bringing the future with him, not just kind of sitting back on what he's accomplished.
Exactly. So, and then of course, you know, it becomes this self-reinforcing system. So where I feel like, okay, we can do bigger things. I mean, Visto Blanco just announced one show. They basically going to play on a couple of really big festivals in Europe. One of them is the biggest metal festival in Europe, and I'm over the moon. There are going to be 80,000 people watching one of my bands. Wow. Fuck yeah. You know, I'm totally all over that. That's awesome. Because I fight for my bands every day. I want them to be successful. There are limitations, you know, and I run into walls every day, and doors get slammed in my door, in my face, and I go through the back door. But in the end, yes, success is something that I wish for every artist, you know, that wants it. I mean, some people don't. They want to sit in their bedroom and make music, and that's awesome.
Sure.
You know, but then you don't need a label, really. Then you can happily do all that stuff by your own.
Exactly.
Yeah, but if you go to a label...
Yeah, and I think that's important, kind of just how we've been talking about through all of it, is just communicating. You know, I mean, that's what the key is going to be. But I mean, that's really exciting when you talk about having somebody like that who, Rodney doesn't need to prove anything else to the world about his music, but that he wants to go get back on the road and do that,
Awesome.
and have and Vaslin come out with them, another really awesome band that I think that's a great fit together, and get to share fans with each other, and maybe bring some newer, younger people over in the European scene that didn't know Cassandra Complex back then, but then they get to also look back at the back calendar and kind of discover it for that first moment as well. It's really exciting.
Yeah, no, I love that. Honestly, this is the part that makes me super happy, and I'm actually really happy about the. I know Rodney for over 20 years. We had probably 25, and we had a conversation in the early aughts about being on the label. It didn't work out, and he hasn't really worked with the label in 20 years. And so for him to come on COP was a big deal for me, because I felt like what he said is like, look, I want a friend. I want somebody who's on my corner and who wants to fight with me for this. I don't want to do it alone anymore. And I was like, dude, that's perfect, because that's exactly that. Exactly. And then then it's also something that I'm self-motivated, I'm self-employed. I have to get up in the morning and somehow have the energy and say, go. And I do that because I feel like I'm representing a group of people that really is doing amazing work. And it's a privilege, and I remind myself of this because, sometimes a job can become a job and you're like stressed out. Like, but the truth is, it is a privilege to represent people. And this is another thing. I think I've said this before, where I feel like I think COP always had a very cool roster of people and bands, but what we're doing now is completely different, because it's strange. I guess I had ambition, but it wasn't something. I struggle a little bit with that word, because ambition can also backfire and be a really negative force in your life.
Sure.
But for me right now, it feels like something that's incredibly positive, because like I'm running out of time. I think that's really what it is. I have X amount of time left in me, which means I need to make this work. And in some ways, that has added incredible focus to me personally. I think that's really, really, it's the biggest game changer for me. That like, and again, I'm thinking, I make 3-year plans for the label. We did the first 3, and I'm super excited because we went beyond of what I expected and what I was hoping for, and which is great. And now I think I have a next plan, and I know where I need to be in 2025. And again, it's going really, really well. My list for 2024 is ridiculously awesome. I'm so seriously, dude. It's just
I think you have a good point there. And actually, there was some discussion around this today, kind of in the whatever, like goth circles or whatever, Sounds and Shadows to talk about. And that idea of, people sharing their Spotify listeners or bands doing it. And is that kind of, I don't know, being arrogant or taking a shot at other bands, or because some people don't like Spotify or things like that. And coming back to the idea that being driven and ambitious and caring about moving forward with your art is a great thing. And especially you as a label wanting to do that, not just for yourself, but for your artists who are also your friends, your family, and moving them forward. The difference between that and being too rigid about what success is defined by, and not being able to kind of change as it goes, years in, going along. What does it mean for me to feel like I have been successful in this? Because the answer might not be the same 5 years into the journey as it was from day one. And to me, that's the difference between whether ambition or ambitious can be a bad thing, is, are you too zeroed in on one aspect of what that means?
For me, it's all about firsts. We had sense of time is horrible. 2021, we had the first time a #1 in the DAC. Now, the DAC is a trend chart, which means it's not a real, selling chart like Billboard, but it's 350 influencers / tastemakers, aka DJs, that decided, you know what, this was fucking amazing. And that made me super happy. This year we had the first band, Black Car Burning, in the actual official German charts. This was the first time Cop has ever done this, which was, and it's still kind of mind-blowing.
It's really exciting, and heck, even for like our Dark Scene singles chart that I put out for Sounds and Shadows is kind of a bit of an answer to the DAC, is why I did it, to say, how can I get the word out about some bands that aren't in front of those DJs or maybe on their purview, so they get recognition too. Can
I interrupt real quick? I think what you're doing there is actually absolutely crucial. So the reality is, catalysts, you always have people that can move the needle. And I think what you did there, also what you did with Sound and Shadows, is absolutely fantastic, because people, I had this conversation with some of my artists, DAC, what does it matter? And I'm like, well, yeah, you cannot buy yourself a Rolls Royce, but what it is, I look at a career of an artist as a brick wall. The wall doesn't get poured in one day. There's always this idea, oh, well, some people have overnight success. Most of the time when you start digging in the overnight success, you see 10 years of hard labor before that. Yeah. But so what I say is, like, the DAC is a good focal point. It is something to talk about, and it's an accomplishment. It's a serious accomplishment. I mean, this is, people were like, oh yeah, it's a pay to play. No, you can't pay to promote your shit on the chart, but the way the chart,
a good song,
exactly, to make it happen. So I think this is one brick in the wall. It's not the wall, but it's one thing. And I mean, Vaseline right now, they were in the single charts for 8 weeks. That was the first time that because after 8 weeks you get kicked out. And they also reached they were in the top 10, which we haven't reached before. So this is things for me where I feel like, great, there's movement. Now they're going to go on the road. They're changing a little bit of their style. They're working on an absolutely fantastic video. So, from what I've seen, I haven't seen the video yet, but I've seen bits and pieces that you're sending me. And I'm like, this is great, man. And so I feel like this is a very helpful tool. Now, talking about your thing, it's exactly the same thing. Your chart is even more underground, and it gives bands an opportunity to be seen. And the reality is, there's exposure kills. I could have a very long conversation with you about that. But yes, sure, if you're in Alaska, yes. But the reality is, you're a small band. You should be grateful for every opportunity to be seen. And I think so what you're doing there is a really, really beautiful thing, because it really helps. And I feel like it's interesting, especially now we're talking electronic industrial. Europe definitely has more sway, more mass, because I think a lot of stuff comes from there. And then America had these little peaks. But I feel right now there is so much cool music being produced here, and it's swapping over to Europe. And I see bands in the charts, and I'm like, oh, this is so fucking cool, because they made it over here. So it's I have bands that are like, well, we want to play Europe. And I'm like, okay, well, if you want to play Europe, we have to prepare Europe for you, because right now you can fly over there and nobody's going to give a fuck. Because back in the day, I mean, it used to be a club has like a built-in audience, so to speak. There were
That's harder and harder now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's but basically in Europe, it's almost impossible to book a small band that nobody knows. So what you have to do is you have to put the band into people's minds. Unicode Machine, he's dying to go to Europe. And I'm like, yeah, dude, let me, we're working on this. We have pitched a couple of things that didn't go anywhere because nobody was excited. Not him as a headliner, but other bands as a headliner. And but I know it's going to happen.
Oh yeah, I mean, that album is up there for me as one of my top albums of 2023. I think what Eric is on is absolutely outstanding.
Yeah.
All right. I'm to the point now where I gotta start steering the bus here to get us there. We're coming up close to time, and what I really wanted to do was give a chance, because again, you're on the show not just representing yourself, but representing so many artists. And so I wanted to fire through some of your artists on the label, and you just give me a quick synopsis of something to be excited for from that artist, so that people can be aware and get a chance to check these out. And when it comes time to release the interview, I'll make sure that we have links to all of this. So
Brilliant.
Let's start out one that's very near and dear to me, because it's from my home state of Michigan, and a just wonderful, bright burning star of a person, which is Emily and Chiasm. What we had a recent release that came up. What can we look forward to with Emily here in the future?
Brilliant timing. So for starters, we just set this date literally today, because we're going to flip the script, because Emily is not just in Chiasm, she's also in Ron Leatherman.
Yes.
And they just told me, I talked to Jean-Marc this morning, and he's like, yeah, we have a double CD ready for you. I'm like, whoa. So, I need to kind of space that a little bit. And we had another EP planned for Chiasm before the album drops. And now we were like, you know what, fuck it. This is the beautiful part of being an indie. We can flip on a dime, and then we'll see how it plays out. But I think she was super excited about it. We're going to drop the album Zone in March.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably 2 months later, we're going to drop the EP that was planned to actually come before. So we kind of flipped that. And this is one thing that, and I'm constantly experimenting, because usually what happens is you drop an album and you have a steep curve up, and then you have a really brutal curve down, and then you have a slow decline. One indicator for me if a band is moving is when the drop is not as sharp and the decline is more linear. That's a really good sign, because then you start to see, oh, people are still 6 weeks later, which is an eternity, are still listening. But so now I want to keep the story going, because I think what happened before is you plan everything as an album campaign, and then you tour. So you maybe have another single album tour. That was the package deal and cookie cutter. And now it's a little different, because you need to stay in the conversation. You cannot take a 2-year break, kind of. I mean, you can if you want to, but you shouldn't. So it's dicey. Anyway, that's that. And then
right, next up here. Oh, did you have another thing for?
Yes, because I might as well throw in Ron Leatherman right there. So They're going to do a double CD album. We're going to do a CD, but we're going to do a hyper limited thing. And we have just roughly talked this out. One of my objectives is to do more boutique style limited editions, because let's be realistic, a physical, even a vinyl or a CD, honestly, who the fuck needs that, right? But if it's a memento, or if it's a piece of art, or it's something that you like to look at, well, then it becomes a different story. So that's basically my angle there. So they're going to be doing something, and that's for June. And there will probably be a single or an EP before that. So we got those two out of.
Next up, quickly, one we just mentioned, Eric and Unit Code Machine. What do we have coming up here?
So basically, there are 3 remixes made of a track off the album. And it's the same idea, where I want to keep the story going. And that thing will drop in February. I will not say who's part of it, but there's a gentleman that is well known for a lot of different reasons. And then there's a younger gentleman that's really fucking awesome. And anyway, so yes, so we're going to have 3 mixes. That's the plan for right now, for Eric, coming out in February.
Very exciting. Stoneburner, Steven, what's coming up here?
Steven is
coming off getting healthy again and getting himself back together.
So, and he's doing an amazing job. Because what she went through is really, there's a lot of personal discipline involved. And if you don't have that, you can really ruin the result. And he did a fantastic job. So he's working on a collaboration project where he literally put it out all over the web. It was like, hey guys, I'm working on this project. I need stuff from you. And I absolutely adore that. I think Steven is one, I have almost unlimited amounts of admiration for Steven and Donna, because these guys are true artists and they're living off their art. And
Steven is an innovator in a lot the same way that you talk about Ronnie, or more than that, like to me, Jean-Marc Letterman. An innovator Steven is always looking to test the boundaries of what just putting on an album means, whether that's in DIY videos that he's doing, connecting an audio book to his music and doing that, doing the visual art that plays with it, or building a giant like structure, like test department style on stage of some world-ending apocalypse wolf and a video to go with it. It's never like you're just getting a song from Steven, and to me, that's always what keeps him so relevant and so interesting.
I just want to add a little story. So one day Steven called me and said, "Hey, I want to be on the label." And I was like, "Oh, great. I was waiting for you to call." Going full to the story where I look at people, and Steven is everywhere, and I appreciate that. He's working his angle and he's doing his thing, and he's fantastic. So I'm really, really stoked. He's a really, on a personal level, he is a really, really good guy to work with. I really enjoy working with him. He's very kind. He's very considerate. Like there was a time last year was kind of burning out, and he's like, "Christian, you need to take care of yourself." And this is something that is not standard. That an artist actually thinks about what's happening on the label side, because in the end, yes, I'm an individual, I have pressures, I have things. And he's like, "Yeah, dude, just make sure you're okay. You're doing great, man. But, don't kill yourself." I'm like, "Thanks, Steven. I really appreciate that."
I mean, it's hard to do when your wife is as good at baking bread and everything to take care of yourself. Like I also have an Italian wife who just feeds me more pasta than is correct. And so, no, I feel for you, Christian. Like that's got to be hard, just smelling that fresh bread all the time. I see the pictures.
No, I mean, she has dialed back dramatically, which is really, really good. I'm actually very excited about it, but I'm incredibly grateful that I had the privilege to live in a bakery for about 2 years. It had side effects.
All right.
I'm a man on a mission right now, but anyway, yeah.
Another one you mentioned here coming up, a lot of exciting things for is Vaseline. And what's something coming up for them other than you mentioned the big tour with Rodney?
Well, they have the video that they put a lot of time into. So I'm very excited about that. They're working on a new EP, and they're also working on a new album. So there's a lot happening, and I'm really glad to see that this is all kind of working in conjunction, because there was also something where I was like, look, you need to go out there. If you content with where you're at, sure, then it's all good. But if you want to go places, you need to go out there. And it can be tough. It's a slog at times, So I was incredibly, again, I cannot thank Rodney enough. That was incredibly kind. Yvette was like, "Hey, I want to get in on the show," which was great, very proactive, and it was like, well, it's not my call to make, which also gives you an idea of how I run this label. I'm not the boss. The band's making their own decisions. I'm basically the helper in a lot of cases. And, those two, I think it's going to be really cool because they both have to offer something that's really special. So I'm excited for them. And I'm really glad that there is also, there's this conversation that we recently had where they just feel heard, and they feel like we're working hard and it's moving forward. Yeah. And again, I'm a human being. This is something that's really nice to hear. When you feel like, okay, you know what, I did a good job, and maybe if somebody says, "Yeah, you did," that's fucking awesome, dude.
That is. So speaking of awesome, badass ladies too, Mary Catman. Tell me a little bit about what's going on with her.
So Mary did something really awesome. She put out those remix stems, right? And she just literally put it into the void, like, "Here, guys, go." And so a bunch of people literally jumped, and I had a bunch of remixes within a couple of days, which is mind-blowing. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to release that of her latest single. I have not heard all the mixes, so we will see how, I think sometimes you have to curate something. You don't want like 25 mixes, even if people really put a lot of work in it. Sure. But like pick the cream of the crop and then release that.
Okay, another one that is very exciting for me that I'm a huge fan of, and when this EP came out, I talked about it a lot and started talking to quite a bit, is the Yeehaw Goth, like electronica of G.W. Childs. And I am just a huge fan. I love the sound. I love all of it. What can we be excited for from GW coming up?
So it's funny because GW could probably put out an EP every other day. I mean, he's incredibly prolific, and he said it's funny because he sends me stuff and he's like, hey, check this out. Oh, and I did this, and I have like 20 other things on file. So with him, it's more about like, you know, channeling a little bit.
Yeah.
So one thing is he has this album Spectrum that he wrote probably like 4 years ago that never saw the light of day. And he's like, hey, how do you feel about just putting this out? And I'm like, you know what? Fuck it, let's do it. So that's one thing. And that's from the time where Spectrum, was everything was colored. I mean, like he had like the, you know, the colors of the spectrum. So that's super exciting. He's working on the material. And what's really interesting with him, because I mean, I've been working with GW for like, well, I would say at least 20 years, because it was part of Soil and Eclipse. And in some ways, he is finding himself finally. You know, he has been I mean, first of all, he wasn't never a singer because he had Jay to do that, but he was curious about it, and I think he's really, really putting in the effort. You know, I mean, he's playing with his falsetto. He's very, very diverse right now. He's doing a shit ton of cover versions just for the fuck of it, you know. And I think it keeps, basically in his case, it's something that he needs to do. He has to put this out. So I'm very excited for him because, you know, we were looking for. This is another thing that I try to do with every band. Most bands that are newer don't necessarily have a defined brand, so to speak. And one part of my job is to have these conversations with the band when we start working together. Who are you? Now, every band will tell you, oh, we're totally unique. We're doing something nobody ever has done. And, you know, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm a little jaded there. No, that's not how this works.
No, sure. Like,
every band needs a story that resonates with people. And so I'm trying. I used to work in fashion for a while, and there you have this concept of a mood board where you cut out fabrics, you cut out pictures, you cut out scenes that you like, and you kind of arrange that on a big board that's in your studio. And this is your new collection. So even before you start on the new collection, you have the mood board, because every time you look, it's like a lighthouse far in the distance, but you can always see where you need to go, because this is what you do. Yeah, it's totally awesome. And so when I explain this concept, so I'm like, okay, so with Vaseline, for example, velvet, opulence, because they have this beautiful, rich tapestry of music that they work with, you know. So basically, we had a couple of Zoom conversations where I tried to tease out of them who they were, and then spit it back, and then they say, yeah, this is great, or no, which is totally, you know, because that's the thing. If you're a musician, a lot of times I don't think musicians really think about this, but you have an insanely awesome opportunity to completely reinvent yourself. Sure. David Bowie invented his own stage persona. He picked from various people and then he refined it on stage. And that's when I read about that, I was like, oh my God, it's fucking genius, because you decide. I know when I'm on stage, I'm a different person than in real life, because a lot of inhibition needs to go away, and you need to tap into that. So it's like, okay, so if we tease this out. Anyway, I love that.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. I think that's very true. Is, you know, or like, I'm also a wrestling fan. So this idea of kind of, there's you, but there's also the character, which is usually a version of you, but maybe you turned up to 11, you know, and that's kind of what you're trying to establish and bring out in an artist, because sometimes, especially as you've said, with the 10 million bands that everybody's got a record now and coming out, you need to shout over the storm, you know, to be able to get your message out. So no, I hear exactly what you're saying. Okay, we're getting tight on time now, and I want to give you a chance to maybe pick out a couple more exciting things that you have coming up from some of the artists that you have, which we're going to just have to have you back, Christian, so that we can get to everybody and talk about them. But what are maybe some things for early 2024 that you want to make sure to talk about?
Well, one thing is that, you know, Stabbing Westward is probably going to put out another EP. And I'm so excited because Chris is doing a lot more production. Walter is doing a lot more production for other band. I think that's totally awesome, and they're really good at it. But I also, was like, come on, guys. And then again, I'm a super fan. I'm like, I want to hear the new music, and I was like, well, because I had a conversation with Chris at the beginning, and he was like, we don't want to be a legacy band. We're not done. We have the future. So I was nudging them. I was like, come on, that cool. That write more shit. People are ready, man. Yeah. And they have a bunch of really cool festivals lined up for the summer. So it would be really fantastic to have something right there. So that's one thing that's super cool. The other thing that I'm incredibly excited about is Bisto Blanco, because they're completely out of my comfort zone. This is a complete departure. And like I said, this is part of the third rail that we now have. And I just got a video from them yesterday, which totally blew my mind. These guys are totally fun to work with. They're hyper professional. I mean, Chuck's been Alice Cooper's bass player for 22 years. So, I mean, that he knows this thing inside out on a level that I don't. So it's fantastic to work with them. So we have a lot planned. They're going to be touring all summer in Germany. It's going to be really, really exciting. They're going to tour the US, and we'll see how high we can kick this ball. This is one thing I'm excited about. Another thing that I can, it's not officially announced, but Azam Ali and I have been in conversations for 2.5 years, and she will, in all likelihood, release a solo album with us, which I am over the moon, because I think what her voice is so distinct, she's a real star. And I'm not talking about attitude. I'm talking about just the way she is. She's super smart. She's incredibly talented. She's an amazing musician. Her husband, I mean, fuck, dude, this whole family, her son, I think he's 15. I mean, it's ridiculous, so very, very excited about that. That's going to be one thing that I'm really stoked about. We already talked about Cassandra Complex, and all these things will interweave, so there's going to be
that's another thing that really gets me going when you kind of talk about the different tiers here, are the possibility of having one of your industrial style artists remix, one of your metal ones, or kind of more of your, I don't know, dark alternative shoegaze sounds, and start to combine those things within the family to make a fusion that is something new.
Well, that's really interesting that you mentioned that, because basically Bisto is going to release their first single at the beginning of February, and I reached out to Tom Shear, Assemblage 23, and I reached out to Chris Hall. And I mean, Chris Hall is a little closer, obviously, and I was like, I really want them to do production work on that. Tom is a little bit of a different story, and I wrote Tom and I said, okay, Tom, I know this is totally outside of your wheelhouse, but I've been working a lot. Tom has done some amazing remixes for the label, and talking about family. I'm incredibly grateful for a bunch of the people that remix our bands, because it always brings different flavors, it brings more attention, and these people are. Bibo and Beton did a remix for Eric Unicode Machine, and I really loved it. And I'm like, okay, man, fucking amazing, really, thank you so much. So send me an invoice. And he's like, for what? And I'm like, well, you just did a remix, so And he's like, no, dude, I love what you're doing. I love how passionate you are about supporting your bands. I love what Eric sounds fantastic. I had so much fun working with this. You know what? Fuck it. I'm not going to.
So freaking cool. I love it.
And seriously, I wrote him back, and I'm like, oh my fucking God, you so made my day. And it's these stories, honestly, that keep me moving forward, because this is not an easy gig. And he's going to come in summer, and they're going to stay at my house. And I know his wife from way back. And there's this whole thing where somebody looks at the label, and this is one thing that I'm very proud of, because I have people that approach me at this point that look at the label and say, you know what? You're doing a good job, dude. I really like what I'm seeing. And, it's nice to get a pat on the back. It doesn't hurt.
Sure.
Right. So anyway, that was fantastic. So yes, they're gonna mess around with Bisto, and I'm really curious. And Bisto is really cool, because this is as rock as it gets, where Chuck's coming from. But Calico, she's like the machine girl. She loves cyberpunk. So she's like, yeah, man, bring in the electronics. Let's fuck this shit up. And I'm like, oh my God, I love you guys. So we're going to see what they come up with. I'm very, very excited about that. So
All right, Christian, we have definitely hit the wall now. This has been amazing. It's been so great talking to you. I mean, over the last few years, we'll chat sometimes, and a lot of your bands. It's such a thrill for me that when, whether it's Rodney or Emily or Jean-Marc, or reach out to me, or even GW reach out late at night and is just like, hey Ken, I just need an extra set of ears on this. Can you listen? And I'm like, so
right.
So it's been a real pleasure kind of knowing a lot of your family there and doing this. I'm so glad we got to have this talk. So here on Sounds and Shadows, we always love at the end here to spin out to something the band is promoting, but I would love to have you give me what is a song or a video or something that you guys have had recently that you'd love for fans to be able to hear and spin out to.
So I would love to share some of the things that come up in 2024 that can't. But since we already talked a lot about Steven, I would say let's do a Stone Burner. Let's do the Corgomancer. I think a beautiful job, because he is playing with AI. He's a visual artist. He's mixing all these things. Like you said, he's an innovator, and he's cranking out these videos that I think are absolutely amazing and batshit crazy. So there you go.
They're gorgeous.
Corgomancer by Stone Burner.
So that is what we'll do. We'll spin out to Corvomancer by Stoneburner. Thank you so much, Christian, and everybody out there in interweb land. Keep it dark, yeah.
There you go.